Welcome to the world of winter wonder. In today's video, we're going to create stunning one-of-a-kind snowflake DIYs that will bring beauty of the season into your home. Whether you're crafting solo or with friends and family, these simple yet elegant designs will add a festive touch to any space. Hi, my name is Katie from Lady Red Crafting. Let's dive in and make some winter magic together. For this project, we're going to start out with some baking powder, and I'm taking this baking powder and I'm going to mix it with some Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster. And for me, I just eyeballed this until I got it to the right consistency that I thought would be best for my projects, but you can do this however you like. Now, this was the first time that I used baking powder instead of baking soda. And one thing that I did notice was that it seemed to get a little bit thicker with the baking powder, and I ended up thinning it out a little bit more because I wanted that little bit thinner consistency, which was almost the same as the baking soda. Next, I went ahead and I grabbed this candlestick from the Dollar Tree, and I am going to use some painter's tape and add that around the bottom of our candlestick. And once everything is taped, I'm taking that mixture we made of paint and baking powder, and I'm going to paint the top of the candlestick. Now, while I'm painting this candlestick, I try not to get any of the paint on the top rim, and I did not succeed completely on that, so I did have to take a baby wipe and wipe a little bit of that off. And the reason for this is because I'm going to be applying some glue to this later on, and I want to make sure it sticks really well, and I find that the glue sticks better directly to the glass than it does to the paint. And now, while the paint is still wet, I did remove that painter's tape. Now, here is what our candlestick looks like. I'm going to go ahead and just set this aside to dry, and I did let this dry overnight since this project took me 2 days to make. Next, we're going to grab this snowflake, and this snowflake is from Hobby Lobby. It was $1.99, but I did get it for 50% off, and it's a really nice, thick, heavy snowflake, and I love that about it. So I'm just going to take it and tape it down to a paintable surface, and using my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, we're going to give this snowflake a really nice coat, top and bottom. Now, while our snowflake is drying, I went back to my candlestick, and this is already dried. And I'm going to grab my Murano Folk Art glass paint, and this is in gold, and I'm just going to take it and add a line around the bottom piece of our paint. And this just gives a nice finishing edge to our candlestick. What I love about this paint, it's so easy to apply. It's almost like doing puffy paint, but it looks a little bit more elegant. Now, back to our snowflake. I grabbed some Mod Podge in matte finish, and I'm just going to apply a coat over the top layer of the snowflake. And I grabbed my heat tool and I went ahead and gave it a little head start for the drying process. And for this next step, I am using a decorative napkin, and I found this napkin at Home Goods. And I just love how they have different napkins there. It's a really great place to look for napkins. And all I'm doing here is I'm unfolding this napkin, and I'm going to remove the bottom 2 layers. And to do this, I use a piece of painter's tape, and that helps assist getting those bottom 2 layers off of the top of our napkin. And once we've got those layers removed, I did take some scissors, and I'm going to cut out my quadrant of the napkin that we want to use. And since this napkin only had 1 quadrant that I was able to use for our project, I needed 3 of these napkins to have enough of the napkin that had the foil on it to be able to make our beautiful snowflake. There are a lot of different ways we could have decoupaged this snowflake, but since this is a smaller napkin, I needed to do this in pieces. So what I decided was that I would do each of the snowflake legs with one of the pieces of napkin. So I just cut a piece big enough to cover everything on one of the legs, and then I just trimmed it to make sure it would fit and not overlap on one of the other legs. And I just continued doing that until I had enough pieces going around the whole entire snowflake. And once we had all of our pieces in place, I did take a piece of parchment paper and a hot iron, and I'm going to iron these down to our snowflake. Now all we have to do is remove that piece of parchment paper, and using some Mod Podge, I am going to go ahead and do a sealing coat over the top before we do anything else. Now once that has completely dried, I did take a small piece of my napkin and I just kind of positioned it in the center of our snowflake, and I tried lining the design up with the other pieces of the napkin on here. And I did not want a stark edge on this, so I kind of had torn this apart when I put this on so it would fade into the other pieces of the napkin easier. Now once I have this in place, I put down a piece of parchment paper, and using my hot iron right in the center, I just attach that piece of napkin to our snowflake. Now I'm going to remove that piece of parchment paper, and taking some Mod Podge again, I will just put a sealing coat over the top of that center of the napkin. Now let's go ahead and let this dry for about a half an hour. You want this to be nice and dry before the next step. So normally I am using a zip sander for sanding my napkins, but for this one in particular, I decided to use an emery board just because it was a little bit thinner and easier to get around all of the edges of this snowflake. Now there is another method you could use, and that is the burning method. And this is where you would take a lighter and you would just light the excess napkin, and it would burn all the way around the outside of the snowflake. And this looks amazing when you're doing it. However, be aware, if you do it this way, sometimes you'll get a burnt edge all the way around as well, which is great when you're trying to do a rustic piece. But for this piece, I really wanted it to be more of an elegant piece. So that is why I am using the emery board and took the extra time to do it this way. Now here is what our piece looks like once we've got all of that excess napkin off of the snowflake. And now it's time to put everything together. I'm going to take my Titebond glue and I'm going to add that to the rim of my candle holder. And then all I need to do is gently put that little snowflake on the top of the candle holder. And I let this dry for a few hours before I did much with it. And now here's what it looks like all put together. I just love how this turns out. And I decided to add a little candle on top of the Snowflake Riser. And this candle I did get on Amazon, and it is a fun piece. It has a little remote control, so I don't even have to get up to turn it on. And another idea would be to add a clear plate to the top of this riser. I love decorating these wood tags, and for this one I'm going to use one of the tags. Once I have that removed from the set, I'm going to place this on a paintable surface, and I use some painter's tape just to secure it into place. And for this project, I'm starting on the back side of the tag, and I'm going to go ahead and paint it with some Waverly chalk paint in the color Truffle. And once that paint has completely dried, I'm going to go ahead and flip that over on my paintable surface. And I'm just going to reattach that with the same tape. Next, I grab my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and we're going to do a nice coat over the top of our tag. And once that paint has completely dried, I grab my Mod Podge in the matte finish, and I'm just going to do a nice coat of the Mod Podge over the top of the tag. And while this is drying, we're going to prep our napkin. I'm just going to unfold this napkin and remove the bottom two layers. We're only going to use the quadrant with the foiled piece of the napkin. And now that we have our napkin cut out, I am going to take this piece and lay it over the top of our tag. Now this is a cocktail-sized napkin, so it is not going to fit over the whole entire tag, which is just fine. We're going to do some fun stuff along the top. So just make sure you have a nice straight edge on the tag, and the overhang on the rest of the napkin won't be an issue for the rest of this tag. Go ahead and lay a piece of parchment paper over the top of the napkin, and using an iron, I just go ahead and iron that napkin right onto the tag. Next, I grab my zip sander and I'm just going to sand in a downward motion and remove any excess napkin. Now I'm going to take that tag and return it to the paintable surface I had it taped down to earlier. Next, I grab some Mod Podge and I'm going to take that and paint a coat over the top of the napkin to seal that in. And now once that Mod Podge has completely dried, I'm going to take my mixture of Waverly chalk paint and plaster and baking powder, and I'm going to take that and paint the top of my tag. So I'm going to go around everything on the top of the tag and then a little bit just to kind of fade in the napkin. So it's just going to kind of make a snow layer over the napkin just along the ridge. And then we're just going to set this aside to dry. While that is drying, I found these adorable snowflakes at the Dollar Tree. And every year they come out with some different wood snowflakes. This year they seem to have a little bit more detail than the last few years. I really like these ones. So I'm using just some filler and I'm just going to fill in the hole on that snowflake. Once that completely dries, I'm going to take this snowflake and tape it down to a paintable surface. Now using my Delta Creative gold metallic paint, I'm going to paint this snowflake gold. And once everything is dry, we're going to put this all together. I'm going to start out by taking some Tight Bond glue and adding it to a dish. And I am going to use that glue on the back side of the snowflake. So I'll flip that over and I'm just going to paint the glue on the snowflake just so I can get a nice coat of glue on that. And then we'll glue that snowflake right in the center of our tag. And for our final finishing touch, I'm going to string this ribbon that I did get at Walmart, and it's a really pretty off-white gold ribbon, and I'm just going to tie a beautiful bow on the top. And now the stunning tag is complete. I just love how this turns out. It will be so pretty on a tiered tray or as a shelf sitter. And if you're enjoying this content, please consider hitting that like or subscribe button below. Thank you. Now here's a fun and easy tag project you can make. I started out with these metal tags from the Dollar Tree. And since there are 2 different color tags, I'm going to make 2 different tags to show you 2 different ways to make them. And since the theme for this video is snowflakes, we are going to be using the wood ornament snowflakes from the Dollar Tree. The first thing I'm going to do is take some painter's tape and tape these down to a paintable surface. Next, I'm going to grab my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and I am going to paint a coat of paint over the top of the snowflakes, and then I'll flip them over and paint the backside as well. Now, while we have a moment, I want to tell you all about this fun playlist I'm a part of this month, Recreation Inspiration. Lorraine from Lily D Creations and I host this every month on the 8th. Our guest host this month is Melissa from I'm Merely Melissa. This playlist is all about being inspired, and my inspiration this month was Ashley Lauren Crafts. Ashley brings so much to the table. She is so talented. I have linked the inspiration video, the playlist, and all of the hosts down in my description box. Please go check them out, tell them I sent you, and give them some love. Thank you so much. Now, once our ornaments are completely dry, we are going to put together these tags. So for the first tag, we are going to just untie the twine that's holding the metal tag. And I'm just going to keep that twine there and string our little ornament onto the tag and then retie that. And one of the things that I really love about this craft is it can inspire you to do different types of tags. So you could do any sort of wood ornament on this. And all year round, Dollar Tree seems to have ones for different times of the year. So you could make this into however you'd like. So you could use this for Christmas, birthdays, Valentine's Day. You could do all sorts of fun things for this. For this first tag, I am going to be using some of these Scrabble tiles. And these tiles I did get at Walmart. And I am going to attach them using my Titebond glue on the bottom of this tag. And once we get these letters attached, we'll set this aside to dry. And while that tag is drying, I am going to start on the second tag. And so for this one here, I am just going to use some vinyl cutouts. And this one just says the word cheers, but you could put a full phrase on this. You could do whatever you like, the to and the from, a poem, whatever you'd like to do. And once the vinyl is transferred over to your tag, we'll go ahead and add the ornament to the tag, where we just untie the twine on the top of the tag and restring that ornament onto the tag. And then we'll just retie the tag. Now here is what our two tags look like. There are so many different variations and possibilities to do with these. One of the ways you could use these are hanging them on a bottle, and here is what it looks like on a sparkling cider bottle. I would love to hear what you think. Which one of these tags do you like better? Number 1 or number 2? Please leave a comment down below and vote. So while browsing through the thrift store the other day, I found this sign for $4 and it was a 50% off day, so I got this for $2. The first thing I'm going to do is remove any tags, and I'm going to clean this really well. And once this is clean, I am going to grab a sanding block and I'm going to try to sand off that heart. After about 5-10 minutes of sanding, I was able to sand this down really nice. And once I was done sanding, I did take a cloth and dusted off all of the sanding particles. I really like the darker color wood on this, so I'm going to take my Waverly Antique Wax and I'm going to paint a heavy coat over the top of this board. Next, I'm going to take a baby wipe and I'm going to wipe as much of that wax off that I can. Then applied a light coat of the wax with my Waverly black chalk paint on different spots of the board. And this darkened up the stain a little bit just to give more dimension. Then lightly dried the stain in the paint, but I didn't want it to be completely dry. And then once I was satisfied, I then took a baby wipe again and just wiped everything down. This just gave a whole different level of blending to the board. And once I was satisfied with the color, I just let it dry. Found this stencil on clearance at Big Box, and so I am going to use this for this project. I'm not going to be able to fit the whole Let It Snow in one long vertical direction. So what I'm going to do is do Let It and then Snow underneath it. Using some painter's tape, I'm going to just tape down this stencil. There's some holes in the stencil for snow, and I didn't want those holes on my stencil, so I'm just going to go ahead and put painter's tape over the top of those. Next, I'm grabbing some matte Mod Podge, and I'm just going to do a light coat of Mod Podge over the letters before I paint them. And once my Mod Podge has dried, I'm taking my paint mixture of Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster and baking powder, and I'm going to just lightly paint over the top of the stencil. And while painting this on the stencil, I am just tapping that down. I'm trying not to go over things twice because I want to make sure the stencil goes on as best as possible. And this paint mixture is going to give a really cool snow-like feature. And while the paint is still wet, I am going to remove the stencil and wash it. Now we're going to reapply the stencil and do the snow. And while our sign is drying, I am going to use some of these wood ornaments that I got from the Dollar Tree and some putty to fill in the holes of these ornaments. Now you can tell that some of these snowflakes are a little bit different, which is what I love. Every year I buy these and every year they're slightly different. So this is really fun to be able to have a few different styles. And once our putty has dried, I'm going to go ahead and put these onto a paintable surface, and I'm just going to tape them down. And I found 2 more smaller snowflakes, so I've decided to add them to our collage. Next, I'm going to take our baking powder and paint mixture, and I am just going to go ahead and paint all of these snowflakes. And once our snowflakes have dried, I am going to position them onto our sign. And once I determine where I want to place them, I will go ahead and glue these on. And to glue them on, I am going to be using my Tight Bond glue. And once all of our snowflakes are glued on, our thrifted sign is complete. What a transformation. I just love how this turns out. And there you have it. 4 beautiful snowflake projects for the winter season. I hope you enjoyed these crafts as much as I did. And if you're looking for more fun and creative craft ideas, be sure to check out our next video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you so much for watching. And until next time, craft more, stress less.